Let me ask you a question, and I want you to actually sit with it. Not answer it quickly, not intellectually, not defensively. Just sit with it. What kind of world would you build if you had no idea who you'd be in it? Not your name, not your gender, not your race, not your wealth, not your intelligence, not your health, not your family. You don't know if you're born into privilege or poverty. You don't know if you're strong or weak, gifted or average, loved or abandoned. You're about to be dropped into a world at random, and you get to decide the rules. Because this question, this single mental experiment, has more power to reveal your ethics, your values, and your blind spots than almost anything else in philosophy. This is the veil of ignorance. And by the end of this episode, you won't just understand it intellectually. You'll feel it. You'll see how it applies to society, business, relationships, leadership, and most importantly, how you live your own life. So imagine this, you're invited into a room, not a courtroom, not parliament, not a boardroom, just a quiet, neutral space, almost deliberately bland. No windows, no mirrors, nothing that reminds you of who you are. There's a long table in the centre. On it, paper, a pen, and nothing else. A voice, calm, neutral, says, "You are here to design how the world works, how opportunity is distributed, how mistakes are punished or forgiven, who is protected when things go wrong, who gets help and who is told to figure it out." You reach instinctively for certainty. But before you write a single rule, the voice continues. When you leave this room, you will enter the world you've designed without knowing where you'll land within it. You pause because suddenly this isn't abstract. You don't know if you'll arrive at the top of the ladder or be born underneath it looking up. You don't know if the world will be built to speak your language or treat you as a problem to be managed. You don't know if the rules you write will protect you or quietly work against you for the rest of your life. And in that moment, something shifts. Your pen slows. Your certainty weakens. The part of you that likes clean hierarchies and simple answers hesitates, because now every rule is a gamble. Every advantage you grant might exclude you. Every punishment you design might one day have your name on it. This is the veil, not a blindfold, a stripping away. No identity, no leverages, no guarantees. Just a single unavoidable question pressing down on every decision. Would I accept this if I were the one it harmed? And for the first time, fairness stops being theoretical. It becomes personal. Most people don't think they're biased. Bias hides behind confidence, behind common sense, behind phrases like, "That's just how the world works." But the veil removes the most dangerous assumption of all, that you'll be okay. Outside the veil, people defend systems by pointing to outcomes. Inside the veil, you design systems by managing risk. And that changes everything. You stop asking, "How do we reward the best?" and start asking, "What happens if I'm not the best?" You stop asking, "How far can winners go?" and start asking, "How badly can losers fall?" This is why the veil makes people uncomfortable, because it exposes how much of our morality depends on where we're standing. The veil doesn't make you kinder, it makes you honest. So sitting there, with the pen hovering above the page, two truths quietly emerge. The first is simple. There are certain freedoms you would never gamble with, not because you plan to abuse them, but because if you end up powerless, they may be all you have. The ability to speak, to believe, to associate, to dissent without being erased. You don't demand them because you're rebellious, you demand them because you might be vulnerable. The second truth is subtler. You realise you don't need everyone to finish equal, but you do need the race to be survivable. You can accept hierarchy as long as it doesn't turn life into a trap. You can accept inequality as long as it doesn't become destiny. You don't design a world where falling once means never standing again, not because you're soft, but because you might fall. There's a moment in the room where everything changes. It's when you stop designing incentives and start designing consequences. You ask, what happens if someone fails early? What happens if someone is unlucky repeatedly? What happens if someone never gets momentum? And suddenly you stop writing bold rules. You start writing careful ones. You stop designing for heroes, you start designing for humans. Because behind the veil, you don't need greatness. You need forgiveness built into the system. But it's not moral forgiveness, it's structural forgiveness. Room to recover, room to learn, room to be wrong without being destroyed. And this is the quiet genius of the veil. It doesn't ask you to be generous, it asks you to be realistic about fragility. Now let's bring this uncomfortably close, because you don't just design societies, you design yourself. Your internal rules, your standards, your self-talk, your definitions of success and failure. And most people design inner systems as if they'll always be strong. Always disciplined, always motivated, always clear. But you don't know who you'll be in 5 years. You don't know what you'll lose, what will break you, what will humble you. So ask yourself, would I accept these standards if I didn't know my future capacity? Would I judge myself this harshly if I didn't know how resilient I'd be? The veil of ignorance isn't political, it's personal. Design a life that still works, whether you're tired, grieving, lost, or afraid. Because at some point, you will be. If you lead others, a team, a company, a culture, the veil asks one ruthless question. Would I accept this system if I entered it at the bottom? Not hypothetically, but honestly. Because power that fails this test always rots into resentment. And leadership that passes it creates loyalty without fear. So eventually you leave the room, the door closes and the world begins. And you'll never know who you were when the rules were written. But now sitting here, you've seen the room and the question stays with you. What kind of world do you argue for when you forget where you're standing? This is the veil of ignorance. And once you've truly stepped behind it, every belief you hold has to answer to it.